Okay, so now we're going to go through paper 2, which is a multiple choice extended option for biology. And this is IGCSE from Cambridge International Examinations, CIE. And this is May-June 2017, and the code is 0610/21. All right, let's begin.
You ready? Ready.
Question 1. Which characteristic do all living organisms show? Okay, so the saying that I use for characteristics of all living things, you might have a different one, is Mrs. Nerg. Mrs. Nerg. Okay, so movement, respiration, and there's another R down here, it doesn't matter which one's first, reproduction. So sensitivity, nutrition, excretion, and growth. So, breathing, no, not all living things have lungs and breathe in the way that you think of as breathing. Excretion, well, excretion is on the list, so I'm going to circle it. Photosynthesis, nope, that's just done by plants, and tropism, that's just done by plants. So, the answer is B. Question 2. The diagram shows some animal cells as seen under the microscope. What will be present at X? Here. Okay, so will there be one cell membrane, one cell wall, two cell membranes, or two cell walls? Well, to start off with, these are animal cells, and animal cells do not have cell walls. So we can cross those off to start with. And was it one cell membrane or two cell membranes? Okay, so first one cell membrane is from this cell, and we have one cell membrane from this cell. They're very close together, they're very tiny, you can't really tell the difference or that there's two of them, but there are two. So the answer is C. All right. Question 3. Each of the diagrams shows an area of cytoplasm, which is from a prokaryote. Prokaryote meaning before a kernel, before a nucleus, and that means that none of the prokaryotic cells will have any membrane-bound organelles. So this is the endoplasmic reticulum, and that is an organelle bound by a membrane. It's not that. These are mitochondria. They're bound by membranes as well. This is just a bunch of DNA that is not bound by a membrane. So yes, it would be C. And D, those are chloroplasts. And again, they have membranes, so it's not D. So the answer is C. Question 4. The diagram shows a section through a root. Okay, we have P, those little structures on the side, Q, this main bit here, and R. There's the whole thing. So P, those are the root hairs. Q is the cortex. And R, that's the entire root. All right, so let's look at this. What are the levels of organization of the labeled structures? So the cell, which one is a cell? Is it a root hair, the cortex, or the root? Well, root hairs are only one cell big. Each root hair is just one elongated cell. So that is one of those two options. Which one is an organ? So the organ is the entire thing, a leaf, the stem, the root. So the root is R. Okay, so it's either that one or that one. And the tissue is a bunch of similar cells, but not the same, working together. All right, so that should be Q. And that makes sense. There we go, Q. So the answer is B. Question 5. Which characteristics are correct for both osmosis and diffusion? So which do they both require a partially permeable membrane? No, only osmosis requires a partially permeable membrane. Diffusion can happen in the air. If you have somebody who's sprayed a very strong perfume at one end of a room, it diffuses to the other room so you can smell it at the other side eventually. So you don't need any membrane. So it's C or D. Okay. And which one do they require a concentration gradient? Yes, they both require a concentration gradient. And because they both go from high concentration to low concentration. Well, osmosis, higher water potential to low water potential, but from high to low. are energy consuming processes. Nope, neither of those consume energy. You don't need energy put into the system for these to happen. These are passive. So yes, the answer is C. Question 6. Which diagram shows the structure of DNA? Okay, first of all, let's look at this. So you have both of them, all four of these have a double helix. So that's good. But two of these have a backbone, and two of these have the bases attached to the backbone, actually as the backbone. So it's either A or B, because DNA has a backbone that the bases come off of. All right, so these are wrong. These C and D are wrong. Now, does A connect to C or does A connect to T? Well, A, it goes to T and C goes to G. So the answer is B. Question 7. The graph shows how enzyme activity is affected by temperature. Okay, so as the temperature goes up, at low temperatures it increases and you get to your optimum temperature, and then it decreases rapidly. How can the change in activity between 40 degrees Celsius and 55 degrees Celsius be explained? So between here and here, why does it drop suddenly? Because heat has killed the enzyme. No, that is not what has happened. Big X. This is one of those ones that they like to mark wrong because it's not true, but one that a lot of people write it in any of the papers. The key word there is killed. An enzyme is not a living thing. An enzyme makes living things work, but it itself is not a living thing, so it is not being killed. Very important distinction there. You will lose marks if you write the enzyme is being killed. Okay, the enzyme has been used up. Note, the whole point of an enzyme is it's not used up, so it's not that. The reactants are moving faster. Well, if they were moving faster, then you'd have more, the rate of reaction would be faster, so that's not it. Well, they are moving faster, but that's certainly not why the rate of reaction has dropped. And the substrate is less likely to fit into the active site. That is correct, because the heat has denatured the enzyme. So the heat has denatured the enzyme, not killed it, so the substrate is less likely to fit into the active site. The answer is D. But this is a trick one because a lot of people write in killed rather than denatured. Question 8. 4 test tubes are set up as shown. Which test tube contains the most carbon dioxide after 1 hour? And this is one of those ones you have to be careful of as well, because quite often for CIE they'll use the same picture but different questions. So you might have seen this exact same picture on a different exam and studied and go, oh, the answer is D, because that's the answer of the same picture on a different exam. But the question is different, so that's not necessarily the answer. Okay, so which test tube contains the most carbon dioxide after 1 hour? Okay, so the first two have a dark covering so that it won't have any light inside. So that means that the plant is just doing respiration. It is not doing photosynthesis. The snail can't do photosynthesis anyway, is doing respiration. And respiration produces, it makes the CO2 go up. Okay? Photosynthesis makes the CO2 go down. Okay? So this one just has the plant in, but with no cover. That means it's doing respiration and photosynthesis. But photosynthesis is going to be faster than respiration, so the carbon dioxide would drop. So it's not C. Okay, this one is just doing respiration. Okay, so in B, it's just doing respiration. That would, the level of CO2 would go up. D, level of CO2 would go up. But in A, both of these are doing respiration, so it would probably go up a lot more than in B or D. So the answer is A. Question 9. The graph shows daily carbon dioxide uptake and transpiration by the plant Agave americana. Doesn't matter what the plant is, it's just saying what the carbon dioxide and transpiration uptake is in a plant. The plant is adapted to live in very dry conditions. So that's just the way this plant is. Okay, so if you look at it, it says what can be concluded from this graph. So if we look at this, this is 8 a.m. Well, this is about 7 a.m. At about 7 a.m., when the light goes up, you get a lot less CO2 being taken in than at night. And when the light starts to go up around here at about 4 p.m., then the CO2 starts to increase. Okay, so the thing with, and transpiration, because CO2 uptake and transpiration are pretty much very closely related. Now, the thing with this is the heat of the day. So during the heat of the day, it looks like the transpiration drops and the CO2 drops because the stomata are closed. And very, very dry places also are often very, very hot places. Not necessarily, but they are often very, very hot. So if they have their stomata open and have lots of photosynthesis happening during the day, they'll lose too much water, and then they'll wilt and die very quickly. So if we look at these answers, A, more stomata are closed during the dark periods. Well, no, when it's dark, they're actually having more transpiration and CO2 uptake than when it's light. More stomata are closed during light periods. That looks like the answer. There is no carbon dioxide uptake during dark periods. Well, that's not true. And there's no water uptake during light periods. Well, transpiration is never at zero. And transpiration drives the water uptake. So that's also not true. So B is the answer. Question 10. In plants, which ions are used to make amino acids? Okay, amino acids make up proteins, and proteins need nitrogen. So which ions are needed to have nitrogen in them? Well, magnesium has no nitrogen in them. Nitrates do. Phosphates, no nitrogen. Potassium, no nitrogen. The answer is B. Question 11. The following symptoms can be caused by a dietary deficiency: bone pain, dental problems, fragile bones, and skeletal deformities. A lack of which nutrient is most likely to cause these symptoms? Okay, so these are bones and teeth. So these are things that will be affected by bones and teeth. So iron, nope, that's to do with red blood cells. That's due to energy levels. So it's not iron. Protein, no, protein, that would be a lot more to do with muscle wasting. Vitamin C, well, that's much more to do with skin and things like that. The gums start bleeding, but it's not the teeth. And vitamin D, yep, vitamin D is necessary so you can absorb the calcium so your bones and teeth are nice and strong. So D. Question 12. Statements 1 to 4 describe stages in the development of cholera. So chloride ions are secreted in the gut. Osmosis causes water to move into the gut. The infected person becomes dehydrated, and toxins are produced by the pathogenic bacteria. What is the correct sequence of the 4 stages? So when you get cholera, the first thing that happens is you get infected by pathogenic bacteria, the cholera bacteria, and those bacteria produce toxins. So that's 4 is the first step. And those toxins make it so that the chloride ions are secreted into the gut. They damage some proteins so that you get lots of chloride ions into the gut. And then after that, once you have a lot of chloride ions in the gut, that draws water into the gut. Osmosis causes water to move into the gut because the water follows the chloride. And then once you have too much water in the gut, that water is no longer in your blood, in your cells, so the person becomes dehydrated. Okay, so it's 4, then 1, then 2, then 3. 4, 1, 2, 3. The answer is C. There we go. Question 13. The diagram shows a human tooth. Which statement best describes the function of this tooth? A, it bites into food. B, it cuts food. C, it grinds food. And D, it tears food. Okay, so this particular tooth is one of the molars. And the molars are at the back of the mouth, and that's where you put the food to grind it into little bits. It's not about the initial biting or the cutting or the tearing, it is the grinding. So the answer is C. Question 14. The graph shows the effect of pH on the activity of 3 different enzymes. We have enzyme X, enzyme Y, and enzyme Z. So the optimum pH for enzyme X is approximately 2-ish. Enzyme Y, the optimum pH is approximately 7-ish. And enzyme Z is approximately 8 point something-ish, 8.5-ish. Okay. So the table shows the pH of different parts of the alimentary canal. So the mouth has a pH 7, the stomach has a pH 2, and the small intestine has a pH of 8.5. So if you look at this, so which enzymes in the graph are likely to be protease enzymes? So first of all, if we look at this, the mouth, pH 7, that would be enzyme Y. That would be the enzyme that's best in the mouth, any enzyme that works in the mouth. The stomach, pH 2, that would be the enzyme that works best in the stomach. And the small intestine, pH 8.5, small intestine. So, protease enzymes. Where do protease enzymes work? Well, there's more than one type of protease enzyme. You have some protease enzymes that are in the stomach, and some protease enzymes that are in the small intestines. They're clearly not the same enzyme because they have extremely different optimum pHs, but some protease works in the stomach, some in the small intestine, so let's see if that's one of the answers. So X and Z, X was in the is in the stomach, Z was in the small intestine. The answer is B. Just look at that again. X in the stomach, Z in the small intestine. There we go. Question 15. The diagram shows cross sections through a root and a stem. Which labels are correct? Okay, so the way that I always remember this is that the xylem is in the middle. So it's in the middle in the root, and in the stem, things grow up into the middle, but it pushes it out so it's still in the middle. Okay, so W is the xylem, and Z is also the xylem, which means Y is the phloem, and V is the phloem. Do we have an option that's like that? So V is the phloem, W is the xylem, Y is the phloem, and Z is the xylem. There we go. The answer is B. Question 16. Which processes are used by root hairs to take up ions and water? So, water uptake is obviously by osmosis, because that's what you always talk about with water. Osmosis isn't really anything else, it's just water. Now, ion uptake, is that active transport or osmosis? It's active transport. Ions have to be taken in actively, generally against the concentration gradient, and water comes in through osmosis. Good. Ions can also be taken in by diffusion as well, but that's not one of the options here. Question 17. Which of the following increases transpiration? So we're talking about increasing transpiration, more water lost from the leaf. A, air around the leaf with high humidity. Okay, if it has high humidity, transpiration is going to decrease. Okay, it's not going to draw the water out through diffusion. So it's not that one. If air molecules around the leaf with less kinetic energy. Nope, that means basically if it's colder. If it's colder, transpiration is going to decrease. An absence of light falling on the leaf. Nope, that's also going to make it decrease, because that means there's not really photosynthesis. Water is not being used up for photosynthesis. You're not going to be drawn up from the root, and it's not going to then diffuse out of the stomata. And water molecules in the leaf with more kinetic energy, higher temperature, that's going to increase transpiration. The answer is D. Question 18. The diagram shows a human blood cell. What is its function? Okay, so there's only really one type of blood cell that has this lobed nucleus. That's the key bit here. The lobed nucleus is for a phagocyte. So what is its function? It's a phagocyte. Phagocytes do phagocytosis. There we go, D. Question 19. What is a disease-causing organism called? A disease-causing organism is a pathogen. An antibody is something that the body produces to defend itself against pathogens. The host is the body. The phagocyte is the cell that does phagocytosis, so it's not any of those. Question 20. What is a function of the cartilage in the trachea? So the purpose of the cartilage really is to prevent your trachea from collapsing in. It's not for gas exchange. It doesn't produce mucus. It doesn't trap bacteria. It makes it so that your airways stay open. Question 21. Which is the equation for anaerobic respiration in yeast? So yeast produce ethanol. So this is the molecule of ethanol, C2H5OH. And C2H5OH. So ethanol is being produced. So it has to be A. It's on the right-hand side of the reaction. This reaction, glucose plus oxygen, produces carbon dioxide plus water. That is respiration. And carbon dioxide plus water produces glucose plus oxygen. That is photosynthesis. All right, there we go. Question 22. A longitudinal section of the kidney and some associated structures have been labeled. Which labeling is correct? Okay, so first of all, cortex is on the outside and medulla is on the inside. So that looks correct, that looks correct. Here, that looks correct, that looks correct. And with C, medulla, that's not correct, and that's not correct, that's not correct, that's not correct. So we're just looking at A or B. Now, going in to the kidney, is that the renal artery or is that the renal vein? Because both of these are the ureters. The ureter is correct. Now, artery, remember, artery is away from the heart, not the organ. Okay, so this is going away from the heart towards the organ it needs. So this means that the answer is A. It's going away from the heart to the organ, and then it will come back. It will use up all the oxygen that it can, and it will come back to the heart to get more oxygen. There we go. Question 23. The steps to produce a reflex action where the hand is withdrawn from a hot object are shown. So nerve impulses pass from the sensory neuron to the relay neuron, nerve impulses pass from the motor neuron to the effector, and nerve impulses pass from the receptor to the neuron. What is the correct sequence of steps? Okay, so the first thing that happens is you have your stimulus has to be sensed. Okay, it needs to be sensed by a receptor. Okay, the receptor is the first bit. So 1. Nerve impulses pass from the receptor to the neuron. The neuron that it passes it to is the sensory neuron, the neuron that goes that's attached to the receptor. Okay, sensory neuron to the relay neuron in the spine, and the nerve impulses pass from the motor neuron. So I'm missing obviously relay neuron to the motor neuron. It goes from the relay neuron to the motor neuron to the effector, and the effector is a gland or a muscle that does whatever the stimulus says it needs to do, basically. So the answer is 3, then 1, then 2. So that's C. Question 24. How many different kinds of cone receptor and rod receptor are there in the human retina? Okay, cones see color. Okay, and there's 3 different types of color. So there's 1 cone receptor for each type of color. Rod receptors basically tell you whether the difference between black and white. So that means there's only 1. Either it's so that they don't show the color. They just show whether it's black or the white. So the answer is C. Question 25. What is the result of the release of adrenaline? Okay, so there's lots of things that adrenaline does. They're looking at blood glucose concentration and pulse rate. So if you have adrenaline into your body, you want more blood glucose so you can use it in your muscles to get away from whatever is scaring you. So it's going to increase the amount of blood glucose. And is your pulse going to increase or decrease? Your pulse is going to increase. So the answer is D, because you want more blood getting to your muscles and your brain so you know what to do to get away from the situation. Question 26. Which statement about microorganisms is correct? Bacteria are killed by hydrochloric acid in the duodenum. No, hydrochloric acid is in the stomach, so that's not correct. Bacteria can become resistant to antibiotics. That, unfortunately, is true. Bacterial infections and viruses are treated with antibiotics. Well, bacterial infections are, but not viruses. Viruses don't use antibiotics. It's useless they're useless on viruses. And bacteria produce sugars that cause tooth decay. No, bacteria eat sugars and then they produce either lactic acid or carbon dioxide that are acidic that cause the tooth decay. So no, the answer is B. Question 27. Dianthus flowers can be one of 3 different colors: red, pink, or white. A red flower is always homozygous, and a white flower is always homozygous. Pink flowers are heterozygous. That means they're codominant. So for the red, they will be RR, capital because they're dominant. For the white, they'll be capital W, again, they're dominant. And for the pink, they will be capital R, capital W, because they're codominant. So if a red and a white flower are crossed, what percentage of the offspring will be pink? Okay, so we have a red flower, red by a white flower, white. We have our little Punnett square here. Doesn't have to be beautiful. We have RW, 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 RW. So if you cross a red and a white, you will get 100% pink. There we go. Question 28. An alligator has 32 chromosomes in each of the cells of its nose. So basically, its nose, it could say any other cell in the body other than the sperm or the egg. How many chromosomes will an alligator zygote contain? Okay, so the nose, those would be diploid cells. Okay, so the sperm or the egg, they will have half of 32. They will have 16. So the sperm or egg, those are the gametes, and they will have 16 chromosomes. And then the zygote equals a sperm plus the egg, so it will have 32 chromosomes. So the answer is B. There we go. Question 29. Which hormone is produced by cells in the placenta of a developing fetus? Okay, so the placenta produces progesterone in order to maintain the uterine lining. Okay, FSH and LH are for ovulation. That's before fertilization. Testosterone, that is the male hormone. The developing fetus, if they're a male, will have more testosterone available to it, but that's not produced in the placenta. Question 30. The diagram shows 4 types of birth control devices, which is not a barrier method of contraception. So a barrier method is exactly what it sounds like. It creates a barrier so the sperm can't pass up into the oviducts and fertilize the egg. Okay, so A is the male condom. That is definitely a barrier method. B is a female condom. Definitely a barrier method. D is a diaphragm, a barrier method. And C is an IUD, an intrauterine device. And basically the copper makes it so that the egg doesn't implant into the lining of the uterus. So C is the one that's not a barrier method. It's a chemical method. Question 31. Which blood component is destroyed in people who are HIV positive? Okay, if they're HIV positive, basically they don't produce antibodies. Okay, and antibodies are produced by lymphocytes. So the answer to this is A. Question 32. What are stem cells? So basically stem cells are cells that start off unspecialized and they can become any cell in the body. So are they specialized cells that divide by meiosis to produce daughter cells? No, they're not. They don't start off specialized. Again, they don't start off specialized in B. Doesn't matter if they divide by mitosis or meiosis. So yes, they're unspecialized cells. They can be any cell in the body. They divide by mitosis to produce daughter cells. And the reason why it's mitosis, remember, mitosis makes mitose in every other cell in the body that's not the sperm or the egg. Okay, so the answer is D. Question 33. The list shows the diploid number of chromosomes of 4 organisms. Okay, so we have the fruit fly, the human, the potato, and the garden pea. What is the correct chromosome number of a male sex cell? So it could be male, it could be female, it doesn't matter, but the sex cells are haploid. So the haploid cells will have half the number of the diploid cells. So half of 8 for the fruit fly is 4. Half of 46 for the human, that's 23. Half of 48 for the potato, that's 24. And half of 14 for the garden pea is 7. So the answer is A. Question 34. Which of these is a population? So a population is one species in living in one area. Okay, all insects in a rainforest. Now insects can be, you could have ladybugs, you can have dragonflies, there are so many different species of insects. So that is not a population. All the tigers in a rainforest. Yep, they're likely to only be one species of tiger. Maybe there's more than one, but they're unlikely. All the kapok trees in a forest. I assume there's just one species of kapok tree. And so the answer here would be 2 and 3 only. D. Question 35. The number of bacteria resistant to antibiotics is increasing. What has contributed to this situation? Okay, sad, but it's true. Choosing the antibiotic carefully to match the strain of bacterium. No, that would actually be a good thing, choosing antibiotics carefully. Not completing the course of prescribed antibiotics. Yes, that is the biggest thing, well, other than oversubscription of antibiotics, that can cause antibiotic resistance. Tracing, testing, and treating people who have been in contact with the infected person. Nope, that does not create antibiotic resistance. That means that people are less likely just to carry the antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And using antibiotics only when essential. No, that's something that will reduce the amount of antibiotic resistance. So the answer is B. Question 36. The processes listed in 1 to 4 will affect the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Okay, which processes would increase the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere? So increased deforestation. So forests do photosynthesis, which takes in carbon dioxide and lowers carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which means deforestation, increased deforestation will increase the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Increased forestation, that will decrease the CO2. Decreased fossil fuel combustion. Combusting of fossil fuels increases carbon dioxide concentration. So if you decrease the amount of fossil fuels, you will decrease the amount of CO2 produced into the atmosphere. And increased fossil fuel combustion, that will increase CO2. Okay, so the answer here, as it's looking for which would increase the concentration of carbon dioxide, we have 1 and 4. So the answer is B. Question 37. The graph shows the changes in the populations of a predator and prey over a period of time. Which point in the graph shows a decrease in the predator population? Okay, so predators and prey. So which one is predator? Which one's prey? Well, generally there's more prey than predator. So this line will be for prey. This will be for predators. Okay. Remember your trophic levels. You'll have fewer predators than you will prey. Okay, so which point of the graph shows a decrease in the predator population? We're looking at this bottom graph. So the answer is B. That's decreasing, and here it's increasing. There we go. Question 38. Which is a reason for using bacteria in biotechnology? Okay, so bacteria are found inside the human body. They are, but that's not really a reason to use them. So are fungi and viruses and lots of other things. Bacteria can become resistant to antibiotics. Don't see how that will be necessarily useful to bacteria being used in biotechnology. Bacteria can make complex molecules. Yes, they can make complex molecules. They're very simple organisms, but they can make very complex molecules. And bacteria reproduce slowly. No, bacteria can basically double every 20 minutes if they have the ideal conditions. So the answer to this question is C. Question 39. Why is yeast used in bread making? Okay, is it to produce alcohol? Now, I don't see why producing alcohol is useful for bread making. That's for brewing, for beer or wine or other alcohols. To produce carbon dioxide. Yes, you like those little bubbles in bread. They make it rise, they make it fluffy. That's what we like for bread making. So I'm going to put that in. To use up oxygen? Nope, I don't see why that would be useful. And to use up sugar. Well, they do use up sugar, but that's not necessarily something that is beneficial or not. You put more sugar in if you want it sweet, and they will still produce the carbon dioxide. So there we go. The answer is B. Question 40. The graph shows the levels of dissolved oxygen and mineral ions in a river. At which point does raw sewage enter the river? All right, so point where raw sewage enters the river is point A. And you know this because that's when the minerals start to increase, because there's minerals in raw sewage, and the dissolved oxygen starts to decrease because you get eutrophication. As you move farther away from the site where it enters, it starts to go back to how it should. It takes a while for it to go back to how it should. Okay, so it drops, so the dissolved oxygen drops to the minimum, it will drop, and then it starts to go back up again. And the minerals go up to the level, the maximum level they will, and then it starts to balance itself back to where they should be as it goes farther along the river. And maybe other rivers feed into it and dilute the raw sewage. So that is the end of this paper, and I really hope you found it useful. If you have, please press the like button, and I would really appreciate it if you'd subscribe to us. If you have anything you'd like to say to us, please write them in the discussion section below, because we do love to hear from you. And have a great day.